Thank you for joining us today at the Project Management Institute's Sustainability Summit 2023. We hope you enjoyed that session, and we will now have a short break. My name is Ruth Hunter, and I work for Johnson & Johnson as a project manager in their acquisitions and divestitures team. I'm joining you today because I'm part of the organising team for the Sustainability Summit in November 2023. I've noticed in the more than 20 years that I've lived in the Highlands of Scotland that our climate is changing. We have less snow, and it doesn't settle for as long. Walking locally to my home, I have had the amazing experience on a couple of occasions to see a mountain hare. As the climate here is changing, when the hare turns white, it no longer has a place to hide in the snow. The fact that a project manager, my skill set, gives me the opportunity to make a much bigger impact on our climate crisis.
Hi everyone, I'm Esther Gordon-Smith and I'm one of the Sustainability Community of Action volunteers. It's International Biodiversity Day, so today I'm going to talk to you about the environment system as part of our ongoing series about sustainability, systems thinking and solutions. So last time in our series we covered mental models, and on the left we have what could be described as a model of a car. It has some similarities to the car on right. It has some significant limitations. It can be useful to have a simplified model of a car in thinking about it. One of the other things we learned is it's really important for you to understand what's going on in your mental model, because if you make mistakes in your mental model, then some of your decisions and behaviors can somewhat raise eyebrows. So today we're going to talk about another part of systems thinking, which is talking about stocks and flows. So here we have some stocks and pairs. Here we have the stock of pear tart, and some of the other things in the system of pear tart are the stocks of pears, stocks of flour, sugar, butter, and there are also stocks of things like baking equipment being clean, the oven, and also a plate and a spoon for me to eat the pear tart. This is very important. And we also have flows within this system. So if I have pears in the fruit bowl, those sometimes flow into being pears in the tart. And when this happens, the stock of pears in the fruit bowl goes down. So I replenish the bowl by putting more stocks or flows of pears into the fruit bowl. So then the stock of pears in the fruit bowl has increased. Here's another example with bunnies. So I might have the stock of bunny. And if I have two bunnies and those two bunnies love each other very much and share a special cuddle, quite quickly my stock of bunnies will increase. And this is another sort of flow as the stock of bunnies gets bigger and bigger. Here is another example of a stock within this system. So here is a bunny eating grass. And so there is the stock of grass and there is the stock of bunny. And another element in the system could be the stock of fox. We're going to come on to that again later. So here's another way to think about that. Ecosystem services. What are some of the stocks and flows within the environment, and what value and services do those provide to us? So here's Saltwich, again, our fictional town. What are some of the ecosystem services happening within here? So one of the services that comes out are things like timber and hay and other materials. So building materials, materials for making fabrics, materials that we can use that are plant-based. Another would be plant-based food. So things like spinach, apples, lentils. Some of these things maybe weren't grown in Saltwich and imported in, but they have come from another ecosystem. There's fish and game. I don't necessarily eat pheasant, but I do eat fish. And I've seen, fish come in from the North Sea, for example. There's also livestock. These can provide services in terms of using them for labour or things like eggs or food or milk. And then there's medicines. So herbs, we've got a nice little bit of eyebright there, some rosemary, things that we cook with, all sorts of different plant-based ecosystem services of that sort. Then there's also fresh water supply. So here we have the water cycle. We'll go into that in more detail in another session. And things like water and air quality improvements. So that's some reed beds in the river. There aren't so many of those in Saltwich anymore, but what were there used to provide water cleanliness benefits. And there's also the sort of shading and cooling that you get from the trees. There's erosion control. So here we have an example of where tree roots are holding some of the soil together, or where there's no root system in the soil, and so a lot of it is washed away. Also some flood protection. So Saltwich and Pepperwich both have flooding problems. There isn't very much flood catchment management here anymore. Pollination. So the insects around do things like pollinate crops and flowers and fruit trees and all of those sorts of things. Also pest and disease control. And apparently these little ladybirds, they really love eating aphids, which is a good and glorious thing. Things like waste management. So it can be anything from, the leaf detritus in a woodland down to some very specific bacteria that can break all sorts of things down, like oils and other things, and other waste materials that are put into the landfills near Pepperwich. Climate regulation, things like, again, heating and cooling, things like changing oxygen in the air, all of those sorts of things, the weather. There's not maybe giraffes in Saltwich, but there are all sorts of other cute things like this totally gorgeous hedgehog, and other bits of wildlife within the Saltwich area. Not so much dolphins, and unfortunately no red squirrels, but some really nice examples of bird life. And then there are cultural services, so things like going for a walk, admiring the scenery. We've got Gilden Vale National Park nearby, and lots of people visit that just to get away from everything. And another way of describing these are provisioning, regulating, cultural and supporting services. And you could think of provisioning as being one of the main ways that we get stocks, and regulating being a sort of feedback loop. So this is another key concept we're going to talk about today, where the outputs are routed back as inputs into a chain of cause and effect. So to give you an example of this, let's go back to our rabbit, our fox and our grass. So the rabbit eats the grass, and these rabbits, they are very special rabbits. So we soon have many rabbits. Now, many rabbits will eat all of the grass. And then also when we have many, many rabbits, we'll have many, many foxes as an input into the fox system. But the foxes will then eat quite a lot of the rabbits. And then when there's fewer rabbits, then the grass will start to grow back. But the problem is the fox can't eat the grass. So then the number of foxes drop off. So all of these things are loops of feedback going up and down with the stocks and flows of grass and rabbits and foxes. And the idea is that they should reach an optimum balancing point in this case, and a stable population of all three. So to finish today, let's ask ourselves some questions. How could we do things like positively contribute to biodiversity in our projects? Or what ecosystem services do our projects rely on? What partnerships could we enter into to promote ecosystem restoration? Or how could we reduce emissions from our projects or increase resilience to climate change? Let's keep asking ourselves, what would happen if we... I'd like you to have a think. What have you learned from this? What new ecosystem services have you heard of today? Thanks very much.
Creating a more sustainable future is the challenge of the century. Together we can engage, inspire and mobilise for action to improve the situation for people and the planet. How? Through the power of projects. Project management brings together the why, the what and the how. Let's come together to use our skills for action. Please get ready because the next session is about to start.